Good morning and welcome to the May 25th, 2022 meeting of the Atlanta City Council Transportation Committee. I'm Amir Faroqi, chair of the committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Council President Doug Shipman, Councilmember Alex Wan, and to my right, Councilmember Jason Dozier. We are just shy of a quorum, but we can go ahead and get started with presentations. And I know we have other colleagues that will be filtering in today. Council members Westmoreland and Waits will be absent this morning, but we expect Council members Lewis and Overstreet shortly. So we can't vote on adopting the agenda or the minutes, but we can dive into presentations and public comment. Do we have any public comment today? Three people. So let's start with public comment, and then we'll turn to presentations.
Mr. Chair, we can't take public comment unless the agenda has been adopted, so we can move forward to presentations.
So let's go ahead and move forward with presentations. We have one presentation today. It's from MARTA, and so I'll invite Mr. Greenwood to the podium. And as I reminded him, I have an unspoken, well, I guess now spoken rule for presentations of this committee that they stay at 15 minutes, don't exceed 15 minutes, so that we can spend most of our time in conversation with the presenting entity or agency. So, Mr. Greenwood, the floor is yours, and your mic is now on.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I assume someone will be advancing the slides for me, or shall I do that? I'll do it. Okay, thanks. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll be as brief as we possibly can. This is the MARTA. This is not, we're not advancing. There we go. This is the MARTA budget. So I'm going to encapsulate and summarize to the extent possible, because we also want to spend some time talking to you about the City of Atlanta More MARTA report, and Carrie Roca is here to do that. So I'll summarize here by saying, we end FY22 with a series of successes. Won't go into the details, but they're listed there in front of you. I will talk about MARTA Reach at the bottom there, that we've expanded the Belvedere and West Atlanta areas, and over the last week we saw a 37% increase in ridership on the Reach program. So it's promising, and we're expecting more good things from that. The budget timeline, as we hand that baton over to 23, has gone through a series of socializations and checkpoints, and it ends, today's the City of Atlanta briefing, of course, and then we move towards board adoption on June 9th. We're going to go through 4 slides on the operating budget, 4 slides on the capital budget. I'll breeze through some project highlights as they pertain to the City of Atlanta, and then again, as I said, I'll ask Carrie to come up and talk about the more MARTA. On this slide, the salient point really is that we're scheduling a full return to service on all 4 modes. You'll see that on the far side, the FY23 budget is equal to or greater than the pre-COVID 2019 numbers, with the exception of mobility, which is demand-driven, and so, of course, we will accommodate if that demand is there. The next slide talks about our revenues and expenses, and you can see over the last 4 years, revenues have outpaced expenses. In the 22 budget, of course, we're doing a balanced and reasonable budget, so that's why you see them equal, but we are expecting a similar trend, and of course, a lot of that overage or excess on the revenue side comes from the CARES Act in 2020 and 2021, $295 million between the 2 years, and ARP in 2022 and 2023, $280 million between the 2 years. A closer look at those revenues, and you'll see that just under 50% of it is coming in from the sales tax. Then we've got 5307 formula funds in the federal assistance area, and ARP, the $140 million I spoke of earlier, so that's another 33%. Those are the main sources of revenue. When we get into the expenses, again, we're a labor-intensive organization, so you can well imagine that labor, wages, benefits, that's about 60%. Being followed up by overtime, the mobility contract, and other contractual services. On to the capital budget. The general sources and uses document here basically says that the capital plan assumes a total capital program of $717 million in expenses in FY23, and this includes $512 million in our state of good repair investments, $45.4 million for the MARTA City of Atlanta, and again, Carrie will speak more about that, and $14.5 million for MARTA Clayton County, and $145 million in debt service payments, which does not assume any additional debt issuance until FY24. Over into the state of good repair funding sources, and you can see there that capital sales tax is a large portion of that, and that's coming out of the core penny. Federal grants is comprised of discretionary grants and formula funds, and then, of course, the reserves utilization that we spoke of earlier. FY23 state of good repair. This is, again, the 23 state of good repair expenditures, including debt service, are budgeted at $657 million. And you see here a breakdown of expenses by the 5 FTA asset categories along with debt service. The largest category of investments in 23 is for stations and facilities, over half of which is a station rehabilitation program budgeted at $72 million. We always do a top 10 look, and so you'll see that, the top 10 state of good repair projects accounts for about 59% of the FY23 budget. And again, we can explain any one of these during questions. So project highlights, jurisdiction-specific project highlights. I'll move into we have 3 categories, 2 of which you're familiar with, which is state of good repair and expansion. This is a new category. This is the policy, innovation, and administration, which is really a nod to the planning and comprehensive strategic work that leverages better results. Again, happy to speak to any one of these. I'll talk about Safe Routes to Transit. It's a new initiative to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and rolling safe access to our bus stops and rail stations. So we prepared a GIS, which is a Geographic Information System tool, to evaluate candidate stops and stations for improvements, such as sidewalk extensions and traffic control devices. We have 11 state of good repair projects in the city of Atlanta going on right now, largely station rehab. The initial wave of station rehab includes replacement of platform tiles, cleaning, lighting upgrades, signage upgrades, and waterproofing in preparation for further work. We have 10 expansion projects going on. I'll speak to any of them during questions if you wish, but you can see them listed there. And we have the 10-year key additional capital programs and projects, so it's just really an outlook. It's a 10-year outlook that basically says the work continues to advance key initiatives while we take care of the existing system. Speaking of, just touching on the bus shelter and amenities program, this says in FY22 we are advancing or have advanced 50 station amenities, and in 23 another 50 will get underway. In terms of system-wide projects and programs, just to summarize this, under the policy, innovation, and administration, we'll commence a long-range transit plan for a comprehensive view into MARTA's future. In state of good repair, I'll draw your attention to the fact that we're leading a regional effort to modernize fare policy and fare collection. And over on the expansion side, we're basically improving how the system operates and improving access to the system to make it easier and safer to use. And as promised, I will ask Carrie Roca to come up and talk about the MARTA financial report.
Colleague. Okay. And I think they do have that report as well to put up.
Is there another deck that MARTA submitted that can be put up? And before you get started, just please introduce yourself so that it's piped into our Channel 26 viewers.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Rocha. I'm the Assistant General Manager of the Centralized Program Management Office at MARTA. Perfect. Yeah, you all have a hard copy of this as well, so if you want to, feel free to flip along. This has been a work in the making. I know we've communicated with the city on several occasions on some of the format, as well as, incorporating feedback and things that the city wanted to see here. And of course, we're happy to incorporate anything else that you'd like to see in the report. If you flip to the page that says Program Sources and Uses, I'll start there. Sorry. And I know it's hard to see on the screen, that's why we brought the prints for you. But under Sources and Uses, we've basically, at the top, shown the projections as well as the actual sales tax that's been collected. And obviously, when you look at the actual sales tax collected so far this year, that is only for FY22, that's only through March. So we do not have that recorded yet, obviously, for the rest of fiscal year 22. So that's why you see a little bit of a gap there. And then we've divided the sales tax in two. The first section is on the Bus Service Enhancement Program, and then the second is the capital expansion and streetcar O&M. Looking at the Bus Service Enhancement Program, you see where the budgets are split. So the budget is essentially primarily operating cost and then sustaining capital. The operating cost, that's the budget line, which budgeted for $118 million for all of the fiscal year 17 to 22. And then you look in the second section of the bus service enhancements, and that shows the actual spent, and that's on the bus operations, mobility operating, and then the sustaining capital numbers have been brought down to support that bus operation. So the total bus service actuals to date are $181 million. Obviously, again, that does not reflect fiscal year 22. We were able to offset some of that service because we do have a CMAQ grant, and so you'll see we collected $8.4 million in federal funds for 2 years. With COVID and the reduction of bus service, we were not able to do that because we did change the routes. And so this year with the routes, as Colleen noted, restoring, we'll go back for that $8.4 million once we can show the federal government what we've done. So on the second half of this is the capital expansion and the streetcar O&M. And as you'll note, streetcar came over to MARTA, I believe it was in fiscal year 18 for a portion of that year. So you'll see that streetcar has started, within that FY19 timeframe. Streetcar operating costs are $36.5 million. And then the capital expansion costs, and those are in more detail within the report, are at $36.5 million. So right now, the total capital expansion in streetcar O&M amounts to 51.8 to date. Again, we don't reflect the fiscal year 22 operating yet. And the balance remaining for capital expansion in streetcar is $133.7 million. There is an acknowledged $3.6 million in interest earnings. If you go to the next couple pages, and I won't go into detail because I know we're tight on time here, we do go into the detail of how the splits were determined based on the routes and the bus service that was put out. And you'll see the operating hours that we report to NTD and how those numbers were reported by fiscal year. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Flipping to this page, this is the breakdown by mode, by jurisdiction, and I did summarize this by FY17 to 21, so we can break that down further if needed. But you can see where more MARTA fits in the jurisdictions in terms of the operating costs. And then this is a chart we have been producing. This is the second month we've produced it, and this summarizes, so for FY22 so far for capital expenditures, we spent $11.7 million overall. For more MARTA, $36.5, and it breaks it down by the projects as well as by planning and design phase, which was a request that the city made. And then lastly, I'll just jump in. I just give you an overview for each project. We've divided it by projects in planning and then projects that are in design. Obviously, projects that are in design, we've got a lot more data, right? We know what we're building. So those are a lot easier to kind of come up with the individual milestones. You'll see that on the Summerhill project. We're able to kind of forecast those more accurately. But for each project, we've put, project data at the top of the page, some key milestones for each of the projects, and then lastly, project cost. For the purposes of this exercise, we've included them all in standard cost categories, which is the FTA required format, and we've put all the projects in that so that it's kind of an even measure across the board. Lastly, on the bottom of the page, we include the major activities and any critical issues that we have for the projects.
So first, I want to acknowledge we've been joined by council members Overstreet and Lewis, which gives us a quorum. Just so you all know, we haven't adopted the agenda or done public comment. We jumped in with presentations, but we'll, after Q&A with Marta, we'll circle back to the voting part of the agenda. First, I want to thank you all for providing the report beforehand. It's helpful for us to have time to analyze it. I'm sure we'll have a number of questions. I'll start us off with a few, and I see Councilmember Dozier's in the lineup, and I suspect my colleagues will have some additional questions. Yeah. I think that we are 6 years into More Marta, and I think there's growing frustration with the lack of shovels in the ground, as it were, and I think you'll probably hear that from both me and other colleagues today. One thing that struck me is of all the More Marta projects, only one has moved to design phase, Summer Hill BRT. The rest are still in planning. Things seem to be perpetually in planning, and this is maybe a City of Atlanta mascot, not just with Marta, but I noted on page 5, and correct me if I'm wrong, that to date, the More Marta program has collected $371 million in revenue. We've spent $36 million, so less than 10% of the dollars collected.
On capital, yes.
On capital project, yeah. So of that $371 million, can you give us a little deeper dive on where those funds have gone beyond the $36 million in capital expenditures, which have really been planning for these 10-plus projects? Where else it may have been spent and is just sitting in an account right now waiting to be spent?
Sure. So of the $371 million collected, as you noted, 36.5 has been spent on capital projects directly. 15.3 has been spent on streetcar operations and maintenance. On the bus service side, 98.8 million has been spent for bus operations for specific routes, and I know that there was another presentation sent over to you all which actually tells you the number of routes that were added. And this was the bus service piece was something that went between the technical advisory committees and the joint project program leadership group that was established under the initial IGA, and the teams got together and determined how much bus service they were going to put out, how much they wanted for each of the projects, how much they wanted, or which projects they actually wanted. And I know you saw several sequencing plans that went through multiple iterations over a number of years. So that's the bus service that's reflected here is the 98.8. Mobility to support those bus operations is 15.3. And then sustaining capital at 67.1 for that service.
The 67.1 has been spent. So just so I'm clear, 36 million has been spent. So of 371 collected, 36.5 million has been spent on capital projects, 15.3 on streetcar maintenance operations, 98.8 on bus operations, and then there's another category. That's it.
No, there's two more categories. Mobility.
Yep.
Is 15.3, and your sustaining capital to support the bus operation is 67.1. So if you look, again, it might be clear to look at the way the two buckets are. The first bucket is on this sources and uses page is bus service enhancements. So we kind of take the half penny and split the half penny.
Yep.
Bus service enhancements, there's the budget of 185.5. We've spent 181.2. We've recouped 16.8 under the CMAQ grant, and overall right now there's a balance remaining of 21 in the bus service side, okay, which, again, we haven't reported this year yet. On the other part of the half penny, the capital expense in streetcar O&M, you started with 185.5.
Yep.
We spent 51.8. and there's 133.7 left in that.
So, I guess the obvious question is, we're spending a significant amount of 371. Thank you for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I realize it's on the spreadsheet as well. Are we generating enough revenue to execute these projects completely?
Well, right now, we have enough, right?
Okay.
But with the planning of the projects and with any changes that we make on the projects, when we, again, look at a project like Summerhill, the project cost has grown other than what we anticipated, right? We got a grant for 58 million, I'm sorry, the project cost was 58 when we went for the grant. That was $12 million in federal funds for that. That project has grown over the 80 million that we projected at 60% design. And based on some of the choices we make in terms of what we add to the projects, the cost of projects right now is pretty substantial, cost of labor. So everything is going up. And so we're going to have to manage it very well, whether it's making tough decisions on projects and where we, take things back, or do we decide to spend more on a certain project and then have to fix it in the end with the other projects that are in the program.
So I want to, my colleagues have questions, I want to get to them, but you hinted at making tough decisions based on increased costs, revenue not keeping up with those costs. What do those tough decisions look like? What are you all hinting at? Which projects are we going to have to look at and revisit? Can we get some transparency there?
I think we always have to revisit, right? And we're going through this now. I'll give you an example on Summerhill, where we're sitting with the team and we're sitting with the city looking at where we are in cost. And, we basically had another review done on the cost. We're going to come back, and now we have to look at the value engineering opportunities that we have to contain the cost within what everybody finds reasonable, right? And so that particular project, we will have to go back to the mayor's office, actually, because there is a substantial change from what we signed on with the project-based agreement. And so, again, this is a back and forth. There is an opportunity that the city has, of course, to weigh in on what the scope looks like and what the changes are, and how much we have to sharpen our pencils when it comes to what we put out on the street to bid.
Two more questions, and I'll turn to my colleagues. The first is, you mentioned a certain amount of money, $98.8 million, going to bus operations on specific routes. Can you share with us between, and if you don't know off the top of your head now, fine, but between 2016, when More MARTA was approved, and now, how many bus routes have received an increase in frequency and service? And what
Yes.
those are?
I had a feeling I might get this question. So, and you do, I know Ms. Molinek sent over a couple of packets that went over with her email in advance of this meeting. This is in the board packet that was the MARTA board presentation. So since 2017, the agency had added 3 new local bus routes, 1 express bus route, 6 community circulators, 3 routes with frequency and...
Hey, can you point to, sorry, apologies for interrupting. Can you point to the page in the board report?
Yes. It's this one here.
And is the board report, can you, is there a
There
page?
is no page number on it, but I'll show you the cover of it. Sorry. I knew I wouldn't know this off the top of my head. It's the More MARTA Board of Directors meeting from October 4th, 2018. Yeah, Melissa, Ms. Molinek had sent those over. Okay.
Is it October 4, 2018?
Yep.
It's in the packet behind the tab. You don't have that, okay. All right, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll make sure, for those that don't have it, we'll make sure you receive a copy.
Do you have any of these with you today?
Yeah, I can give you this one.
Yeah.
If you like.
I'll pass this around. And I was just handed this when we walked in.
I had a feeling I would get that question, so. Yeah, sure.
I know. Okay, well, I think we'd all like that document before we have that conversation, and maybe we can make copies. And the last question I'll ask is separate from More MARTA, but just we have before us a resolution that we'll need to file an ordinance because it's more appropriate for this regarding a free fare analysis. Does MARTA have a some reflection on that proposed legislation?
I think it deserves a review. I think it's fair for us to be looking at that issue. I also think that, we have to bear in mind that fare increases have been very rare in MARTA's history. $2.50 is relatively low compared to other transit agencies. Requiring a fare has its operational benefits, of course. It's a substantial part of our revenue stream. And as these ARP funds and other federal funds start to go away, we'll realize a greater reliance on the ongoing availability of fare revenue. Fare revenue also serves to ensure that, our operating regulations in terms of who rides for how long and all of that, we have a method of making sure that we're able to monitor usage. And so there are pros and cons, but our gut reaction is, of course, we should participate in this study.
Thank you. And I lied, one more question. As my colleagues ultimately will all receive this, I assume you're referring to this page that says services are already implemented. So on it, it says 15 routes with increased service frequencies, bus routes, 15 bus routes with increased spans of service, but doesn't identify those routes. Can you?
I can certainly get you that information. In fact, the bus service started before we actually started collecting the tax, just so you know.
So does that mean it's not a more MARTA?
No,
increase?
it was part of the more MARTA. So the tax was passed, but before you started collections, so the collections did not start until into the next calendar year.
Thank you. Councilmember Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to kind of tug on that string a little bit more, the increase of bus frequency is something that a lot of my communities have relied on. Several of our bus routes went up to 15-minute frequencies. And I know with the pandemic, with staffing shortages, that those got cut back significantly. Thankfully, they weren't cut entirely like some of our other routes were, but those frequencies were cut back. With the budget being very good looking in terms of being able to fully restore service, are there any challenges associated with hiring or labor issues or anything like that that would prevent us from getting back to those 15-minute frequencies that we do?
Yeah, the choke point for us now is workforce. We are still operating around 15-20% low on our available workforce with an absenteeism rate that exceeds our general 8%. So that is a choke point. Notwithstanding, we are doing some very aggressive things to increase our recruitment, including retention bonuses and sign-on bonuses and more aggressive advertising. So we're confident that will return by the end of the summer. We expect to be back to regular frequencies throughout the system.
And is that impacting rail service at all? Do y'all have the same sort of short?
There's a similar impact on rail services, but we started 10 new rail operators just last week, and we've already started to realize more reliable service.
Okay. Another question that I had around buses is with our ART program. I know there's been a lot of conversation about BRT, but with ART, I know, based on my understanding, you were able to get higher frequencies with existing infrastructure. So my question is going back to Councilman Faroki's line earlier about, we don't see a lot of shovels in the ground at this point, but I think most of the ART programs that are slated are expected for delivery in 2025. So if we're using existing infrastructure, why is it taking that long to deliver on a program that doesn't have the same capital investment required?
In general, your ART system still requires improvements. We're still talking about transit signal priority and redesign efforts to make sure that we're getting the most out of the service. So, as you'll recall, just to make a routine change takes a certain number of months to go through the signing process and the board period. So, when you're talking about ART system-wide, it is a wholesale look at the system. That's why the delay.
Okay.
Want to add?
Yeah. I'll add to that. It still is the same time frames in terms of right-of-way acquisition. We still have to go out and go through the entire process. I will tell you that the Cleveland and Metropolitan projects are nearing their 30%, so that switch going into design is very near for Cleveland Metropolitan, for Bankhead, and there's one other one that's very close. Bankhead, Cleveland, and Metropolitan are the three that are ready to make the switch into the design phase.
And if I can just make a comment in general about, we hear loud and clear the concerns about shovels in the ground. And while, I've seen ribbon cuttings and shovels in the ground on an increasing basis over the last several months, MARTA's the first to admit that we have to get rolling. And so we've, through this budget process, you'll see that we've increased a lot of our capacity to spend issues. Most of the spending in this FY23 budget is on the capital side, and it's on making sure that we have capacity to spend, to execute, staffing up with on the planning side so that we can get the projects through the process. And the fact that we're into, we have a small starts program and a fast starts program now with fewer, not fewer checks and balances, but fewer time frames involved in moving these capital programs, you will see that start to come through.
Okay. Just, I guess my last question related to buses. The bus station or bus stop amenity program that you had described earlier, I'm curious, where there's some opportunities for input from council members in terms of where we think there might be some greater opportunity to get more facilities for our communities. Separately, recognizing that MARTA has a number of other programs that maybe not are transit operations focused, but are tangentially tied to this. I'm thinking about the TOD financing program that y'all have supported affordable housing projects with in my district at GE Towers. That was one of those projects. Where I get concerned is that the transportation infrastructure, the transit infrastructure that is there, it's just a bus stop. It's just a pole in the concrete. And recognizing that there's millions of dollars being spent for these housing subsidies, I wonder why not also bake in bus shelter amenities or improvements or things like that to make it much more transit-oriented, I guess, in terms of the overall package that's being delivered. Since millions are already spent, another $30,000, whatever it costs for a bus shelter, for instance. Even if the ridership threshold may not be there, I would think that that would be part of the calculus in terms of what the overall project would require.
So I thank you for the comment. I will start with, you're aware that we have a 5-year 1,000 amenities program underway, so that's 200 amenities system-wide per year, and that is why you see the 50 coming next year. So that's improvements, that's placements where they don't exist. We have a GIS mapping tool that helps us assess the priorities, because clearly we can't put amenities and shelters at every one of our 7,500 bus stops or thereabouts. You talk about input, we're always open to that. If there's a recommendation or a request to review something, we'll absolutely take a look at it. But, to be fiscally responsible, I do have to make the comment that it is a give and take.
Okay. And it just, as I think through what other cities have done on this front, I know maybe a bench or a bus shelter may not always be financially the best solution considering the ridership challenges. But I know as a baseline for many of their bus stops, they've done the modified poles that have seating kind of welder baked in. Is that something that MARTA is considering or pursuing, recognizing that, a lot of my district, there's a lot of transit dependency, but there are no sidewalks, there are no streets are not safe. And as I think about how do we make transit a much more dignified experience, particularly for those who ride the bus, something like that will go a long way to ensuring that happens. And I don't know what MARTA has some.
Absolutely. When we talk about our expansion, our new services as they come out, our stations, we call them stations, not the 38 rail stations, but when we're talking about BRT in particular, those stations all have those amenities that you're talking about. So, to the extent possible, we'll have benches, we'll always have shelters, we'll have communication, we'll have monitoring, we'll have, all of those amenities in place.
Well, not even the BRT stations, but thinking with regular bus stops.
ART and existing, yeah.
Well, just a pole in the dirt isn't always going to, doesn't feel welcoming to someone who is waiting for an hour.
Yeah, well, so we also, we mentioned the safe streets to transit, so that terminates at the bus stop, and at the bus stop we'll have standards in terms of the amount of concrete, so it's not just dirt and a pole, but the amount of concrete. To expand that to seating, we'll have to take a look at that.
Okay. Can you talk through that was going to be my next thread, is with regards to say routes to transit, what that looks like and what we can expect from that program?
Yeah, so that program gives us, it's part of our PIA initiative, and we only have $2 million in FY23, but that's to initiate the conversation. MARTA clearly cannot be responsible for all the sidewalks in the city, but it allows us to start the conversation and advocate on behalf of MARTA residents, and we are taking a hard look at those the lighting, the sidewalks, the physical impediments to motion on your way to the bus stops in the immediate vicinity, and of course leveraging our partners to make sure that the rest of the route is accessible as well.
Okay. And then with regards to the rail vehicle replacement, I know we saw the cool renderings of the new trains that are coming. When can we expect those to be delivered?
The first one is due to roll in late 24, early 25, not for service, but for us to start kicking the tires, as it were, and breaking it in and doing all those things that have to happen. In terms of service, you'll see after the first one gets here, we have about a year or two to bring them all in.
Okay. And then on the financial report that was shared, one of the things that stuck out to me, the cost per mile year over year for rail and for bus has gone up. I think 3 or 4 fiscal years ago it was $1.50. Now it's at something like $2.20. But the cost for the streetcar has gone down. Can you explain what's happening there?
Was it Carrie's report or
It was Carrie's report. It was,
Let's see, we have the cost per revenue mile.
Yeah, let me look at that. It may be a function of how many miles we're operating in the given year, so it's a ratio, right? So costs, generally it's operating costs and maintenance costs, so that not too much change in that regard, especially if it's inside of the same contract year, but it may well be the ratio of the number of miles that we're serving in that particular year.
And with the costs that are going up, is any of that a function of inflationary pressures that we're seeing?
Well, maintenance absolutely would be. Parts. And again, labor is controlled inside of our contract, but parts, supplies, availability, even over-the-road transportation and delivery of goods, we've seen a significant increase in all of those things in the recent 2 years.
Okay. And I imagine with labor costs, too, as y'all are trying to track and do bonuses, those costs are kind of baked into those.
Yeah. When the labor is there, there's a fair wage, but also there's a lot of overtime involved when people are absent, so you're already talking about a higher rate of pay for that.
Okay. And then my final question, I promise, just kind of tugging this string a little bit with regards to inflation. It's something that's what Councilmember Juan was joking with me earlier, just because I bring it up at a lot of meetings. I know costs to deliver goods and services are going up, but with so much of MARTA's revenue being based on sales tax, and I get that revenues are up or are projected to be up, I'm curious how much of that is a function of the inflationary pressure that we're seeing on goods and services that are feeding into that sales tax. And so yes, revenues are up, but my concern is that the cost to deliver services is also going up. And so even though that nominal number is higher, it's not, I don't know if there's any other evaluation that's being looked at to determine whether or not we're where we need to be to deliver.
I think that's a fair point. It's about the pace, right? So the pace of inflation has some positive effects for us in terms of the sales tax revenues, but you're right, we're also paying inflationary costs for our supplies. I think the big win for us is the federal funding that comes in over and above that. So like I said, $140 million a year through ARP, that outpaces any of the expenses that we're carrying.
That's it. I yield my time. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Lewis. I'm happy that you mentioned this record money that the infrastructure planning, because I don't think have we ever seen this kind of infrastructure funding influx in the history of our country?
I think you're right. I think the federal government's been particularly good to transit and infrastructure of late.
And I can't see this happening again. Or can you project that happening? This type of money coming in, being available.
Can I project that? No, I can't project that.
So, but we can say that when you're before I even go into that portion, since we can't project this happening again, with access to this kind of funding, if you're not building rail now, how can you see it coming in the future?
I can't see into the future. I can speak to the fact that rail is not the only mode we're advancing in our projects today. So, there is BRT, there is rail. We're talking about all of these things, but in terms of the future, I really can't say what that holds for rail.
And I say that because we didn't talk about rail. This is the most packets I've received since I've been in city council from one department, from one organization. This is the shortest presentation. And also, all of us did not get the packets. You were reading from a packet that we didn't get. And we
okay.
Yeah, we didn't
you're talking about the more MARTA.
Which is what we specifically asked for before we even had this meeting. So it's kind of difficult for me to fully ask all my questions because I asked for this stuff before the meeting.
Okay, Councilor Lewis, we will say that MARTA did send it in advance. I apologize if it's not in your packet. It is in some packets, and we will ensure that, and quite frankly, after you've had a chance to review it, let's make an appointment, and we'll answer any question that you have.
I like to be transparent.
Absolutely.
I know my folks are watching this, and if you, even just that meeting, that's that old Atlanta stuff. They're used to that old Atlanta stuff. That's not happening this time. Before I even get into my question, I want to start with a restroom story. Yesterday, I got a call about by a young lady who I grew up with. We used to catch the 78 together for down here to City Hall, working for Mayor Shirley Franklin. We all did that internship. And one time, she reminded me of a time in which we were at Lakewood train station, and I had to use the restroom. And we looked around. We couldn't find anybody. We started at Oakland. We started at East Point train station. I couldn't use the restroom, so we said, wait, we go to Lakewood because they have a restroom. We went to Lakewood, tried to use the restroom. There we found out we couldn't use the restroom, so I had to leave the train station and go to the bushes. And I know that was because the restroom was locked. So yesterday I get a call from a person who I used to catch the bus with, and she told me the same story for her son. And so my question to you is, are the restrooms in the MARTA stations on the south side of the city, are they open? And have they, I'll be specific, has Lakewood restroom ever been open to the public? Or is it open?
Let me speak to the system in general. Our response to the restrooms is the same, whether it's the north side of the city or the south side of the city. The restrooms, when we got to get to the point where workforce was such that we didn't have as much access to clean them and monitor them on a regular basis, we did shut some down. I'll say this too. I'll say that having a restroom at every station is not something that is common in transit systems. So a lot of transit systems, you'll have a restroom just at the Nexus station, like 5 Points, and at the end terminals. So let me start there. That's not the way it ought to be. We should have as many restrooms as we can to face the public, and that is MARTA's opinion now. That's why you'll see in our budget the smart restrooms coming up, that we don't need someone there. There's remote access. And on top of that, I'm disappointed to hear the experience you shared about yesterday, because what we have now, while we wait for that, is a manual process where the person needs a restroom. If it's locked, there's a sign there that tells them to dial a particular number. We'll get someone down there, whether it's from someone that's in the station right now or someone in an adjacent station, so just say, stay put, give us 5 minutes, or even MPD, someone's going to get there to assist you. So while we wait for the implementation of all our smart restrooms, while we wait for the return of sufficient staff to keep all the restrooms open, we have an interim solution.
And for consistency purposes, to be clear as well, I think that the restrooms are open in the white areas and not in the black areas. And I would like a list. I want to know if Marta can send me a list
Sure.
of the restrooms that are open
Sure.
in the city of Atlanta and the train station that are open.
Absolutely. And I'll stand on record saying that there's no race-based decision for which restrooms are open, but we'll give you the information.
Thank you. I'm not finished as well. I got a couple more. Thank you for dropping off the Marta report to us. I got a couple more questions sent
Sure.
from my residents because they are very interested in some of this stuff going on. We're 5 years into more Marta. Is this the first plan, first budget? Is this the first financial report you've done in 5 years?
You want to take that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So as I was going back through all of the data, there were regular monthly updates at one point in time through the JPLG, which was a joint leadership group. So I did find several monthly reports that had been done at that time.
Okay. And they've been reported to City Council?
They were reported through the JPLG, which is the Joint Program Leadership Group, which was made up of both MARTA and the City of Atlanta.
Can MARTA produce documentation of how Peachtree ART decision was made?
Yes, we can.
Why is the Cleveland Avenue? So, for example, last week you all had two Cleveland Avenue meetings, 2 days straight, and I attended one and didn't attend the other one. The week before I had a meeting at the same exact location, we had almost 200 people show up. At the MARTA meeting, and all we did was send out a social media post. At the MARTA meeting, you all have a budget. Why? There were only 3 people there. There were only 3 people there. I'm just thinking about, how are you all getting out word to folks, or how are you communicating with because I know in my first meeting with MARTA, it was probably more than 3 at the second meeting. The first meeting, that was it, if you include us, because I signed it, there were 3 people. My question is, how are you all getting out word to folks when you're having these meetings, when you're changing and you're making decisions to the community? How are you getting out word to them?
We'll ask our customer outreach team and the capital programs folks to speak specifically to Cleveland, and I think we can speak to the issue in general. Thanks.
Hey, thanks very much for that question. I'm Greg Jafrida. I lead communications and engagement for MARTA Capital Programs. I worked with the engagement team that developed the outreach strategy for the Cleveland Metropolitan ART meetings. We generally try to do a outreach campaign that is both digital and print in person. So we had email stakeholder list that went out to a MailChimp group that we put together based on past community meetings. We collect email addresses from as many residents and stakeholders as we can. We put together a social media campaign that's on Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. And for in-person, we recognize it's very important to get out to the system. So we had postcards and flyers that were distributed at both of the endpoint stations on that project. That's East Point Rail Station as well as West End Rail Station. And we had canvassers on the bus. And so I could get you the exact figures. I think our print run for that one was probably about 5,000 postcards, I think, as well as yard signs, probably about 60, 70 yard signs. So that went out about 2 weeks ahead of time. I can tell you it's very hard to predict exactly which meetings will really generate a lot of attendance. We have not heard a lot of controversy, for example, about that project. We've generally heard folks are very supportive of the enhanced service that it's going to bring. That could be one reason. Sometimes there are conflicts, when we set the meeting date with another event that we don't fully foresee. And so I think I'd be happy to take any other questions.
I know we talked about inflation. Thank you for that. I know from the first meeting I said I wanted to be a part of the planning portion of these meetings, because I know it just popped up and it was that week and nobody showed up. I know I got a call and I came because of the person who called me and invited me. That's the only reason why I showed up, because nobody in my community came.
Okay.
The reason why people are asking for sidewalks, and we heard a lot about sidewalks is because we feel like we're not getting everything we paid for. I feel like we asked for a red house and you're giving us a yellow house. And now we're like, hey, what about helping us with the sidewalks? You talked about a lot about inflation, but inflation is now. For the past 4 years, I'm looking at this list, everything is impending. Everything is pending. Do you have a date for some of these, like the ARTs, which aren't as difficult to do it? Can we get a date? Because shovels in the ground, there's a quote that an airport without cranes is a dying airport. We don't see any rail. We can't find any rail that MARTA has done in 20 years. So when we're talking about a mayor who keeps saying shovel in the ground, we don't see any rail for 20 years. We're now looking at this list that had, this project list, the previous one I seen had some kind of rail on it. I don't even see rail on this list. And so I'm wondering when are shovels going to hit the ground, in particular for Cleveland Avenue ART and Metropolitan ART?
Yes, so in particular for Cleveland Avenue, if you go to page 12 of the booklet that I did hand out, that has your summary. I have plenty of those. There are 20 copies.
I'm the only person on that. Okay.
Is this the monthly progress report?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not ring-bound for us, but we do have it. Everyone
No,
should have.
I brought 20 ring-bound copies for y'all.
Yeah.
What page?
Okay, so if you go to page 12, there's this section in the middle called Key Milestones. And right now, the projected start of construction, which is roughly the sixth milestone down, has a start of October of 2023 and a completion in December of 2024. Now, I'll just caveat, until we get to a 30% design, and this is per our IGA with the city, we're still in a planning mode. We're still deciding what's the scope look like, what does this construction schedule need to look like, what are the things that are going to impact our project, what sort of utilities do we need to relocate. All of those things kind of come to the surface when we're doing the planning part of the project. We incorporate our right-of-way acquisition, all those elements. Once we get to 30%, we are sitting down with our PMT, which is a Program Management Committee, and the Program Governance Committee to set and lock in the schedule and the cost. And then again, per the IGA, if anything changes, then we have to come back to the PGC for approval and send a letter to the mayor. So there are requirements for us if things change once it gets into that 30%, which is really when you know what you're building.
The operational expenses, it sounds like a lot of your MARTA operational expenses are being paid by more MARTA that typically were paid for before that. Can you also give us a list of operational expenses that more MARTA has started paying for since you got that new influx of funding from us?
So you're referring to the bus service operational expenses?
I was listening to today, I heard a lot of operational being paid for through the more MARTA plan. And it sounded like sustaining MARTA instead of, because I thought that more MARTA funding was to grow.
Right. So one element of the More MARTA Atlanta program was to put out additional bus service. And actually, if you looked at the sequencing plan, I know we've had that in these meetings before, on the very bottom there was a start of bus service and it goes all the way through. That was a decision that was made to put additional bus service out. That was an ask of More MARTA Atlanta. And so that additional service was quantified and continues to be quantified every year based on what routes we're operating and what those operational costs on actuals. So based on what we've reported to NTD.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Overstreet.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for your presentation, and it's good to meet you.
Carrie?
I'm going to have to have a meeting with you just so I can better understand your viewpoint on everything. But, yeah, Carrie Bradshaw, you know that name is very popular, right? I watched that show for every last one of them, but anyway, good to meet you. I have quite a few questions. I will say that my colleagues asked most of them, and therefore you've given us some answers. But the one that stands out a lot that I'd like to know more about is, where I'm still starting back with Councilmember Faroki, and he says that you all are hinting at what you're doing and where we're going. And I want to know, why are we hinting? Because I know that for months now, we've known that we've got this amount of projects, which is quite a few projects and a lot of deliveries that have to take place. And the budget is not going to be stagnant because of inflation and the workers shortage and everything we talked about today. And so we know for sure that we need a reprioritization and a rebaselining. We know this. And I really want us to do that. I know I've asked a couple times. I've even expressed how painful it was when we had to do it with Renew. It had to be done because we only had this amount of money that we knew we were capturing, and we had a project list that was so long that we knew that we could only get these amount completed and these amount teed up for the next T-Splosh, which I just want to thank Atlanta. Just take a moment to do that, because now we know that some of the projects that we teed up are actually going to take place and get done. So I am asking you now again, if we can all agree that we need a rebaselining and reprioritization of our MARTA lists.
Sure. So thank you. You speak to transparency and hinting. I think when Mr. Faroki said hinting, he was speaking about the fact that inflation is causing costs to go up. This is very true. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to say that we're hinting. I say that, it's an iterative process, and as changes come on board, we do notify. But your request for a holistic baseline review is absolutely on the table. Even with that, we'll continue to change, right? So even when we think we've got the number right, other factors may come in and drive those numbers up again. And so our commitment to you is to continue being transparent. And if it feels like a hint, we'll be louder and more direct to make sure that you've got that information.
Okay, so that we're all on the same page. Councilmember Faroki, when you were speaking about hinting, were you speaking about, can you help me with that?
Yeah, so I think Councilmember Dozier brought up the issue of inflation. My questions were in line with Councilmember Overstreet, which was, I believe, Carrie, you mentioned hard decisions were going to have to be made because revenue is not keeping up with the cost of these projects. And so the question I was asking is the same as Councilmember Overstreet, which is like, when are we going to have these hard decisions?
Yeah.
And she maybe said it more artfully, was like, we need to have a rebaselining. Let's talk about that. When is that going to happen? We're talking from the same page here. I'd amplify her questions.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
So in layman's terms, we're going to have to rip this Band-Aid off.
Yes.
And we need a list of the priorities and take it to the community. The priorities are all of the projects that everyone thinks that they voted on 4 or 5 years ago. And then we're going to actually tackle which ones are going to happen and how we're going to pay for them from the money that we're capturing in taxes. Like, we have to do that. We can't have all of these lists with all of these projects, and we know that we don't have the capability of delivering them. So I just think that we need a rebaselining so we can actually get to work. Because what happens, and I appreciate you, Mr. Greenwood, for actually saying that that things aren't going as fast as they could right now. Like, I appreciate you for saying that, because that's important that people know that we're right there with them, that what they're saying makes sense. We don't want anyone to feel like they're not witnessing what they're witnessing.
Right.
So I think that we need a list, a trued up list of what we can accomplish in the exact amount of time and how much that is going to cost us, and tee up the next group, because that's what we had to do. And that, once you rip that Band-Aid off, everyone's on the same page, and it's amazing how they look forward to the actuality of something getting done. Sometimes when you have 15 things to get done and you know you only have time to do 3 of them, or money to do 3 of them, it's hard to even get started on number 1. So I just want us to create an environment of a true list that we're working on. That's what I want us to do. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor. I mean, I will say that, yes, we agree that it's best to focus on the near-term, tangible things that we're going to be doing, recognizing also that we have a responsibility to develop the long-term look. So, as we share the long-term, you're absolutely right. We'll have to say, that's nice, that's on the shelf. Here's what we're focusing now based on what's available to us.
Okay. And I guess, I know that this is something I'm asking you specific about today. If you could all go back and think about what I'm asking, and maybe we could do that in a public way so that everyone understands what page we're on.
Perfect. Thank you.
But so moving on down, from what I'm looking at today, it does look like we're experiencing a little surplus.
Correct.
Yeah, so we're not reducing any bus routes, though, right? Like, we're definitely not reducing.
No, in fact, we're returning to the pre-pandemic schedules.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I just always want to ask that because I get a lot of those questions. People are afraid that we're going to switch up the bus routes, or we're going to start, taking them away. And I just wanted to be clear about that part.
So thank you for that question. Let me clarify that. The scheduled amount of service will not change, but what you're speaking of is the bus network redesign, which is an initiative that MARTA is undertaking right now. We've been out to the community for some time. We've gotten nearly 9,000 responses in terms of where does the community want to see our bus network grow? Where do you want to see it change in terms of grow in terms of the amount of access that individuals get to bus networks? So there are 2 concepts. There's a concept that says, high ridership, high frequency, fast network, and the other concept that says go everywhere, don't worry too much about how much frequency you have, but make sure you reach all the different areas, and you can't have both. Same pot of money, so what do people want to do? It's just something that, MARTA's never done this, and most major transit networks do it every 10 or more years. So it's something that we do need to look at. We're asking the question, and we're being very conscious of what our communities want. And frankly, they are divided, but it is a conversation that we're having.
Okay. All right. Well, as we redefine, I just want to make sure that, the people that really need us the most, that are riding MARTA, are those bus lines will not be cut or altered in a way that makes it really hard for them to get to their daily lives, especially those that are riding the bus because they have to. Like, they don't have a car. So, or transit, period.
Can add on to that. That is a request that MARTA has for everyone and representatives as well to encourage folks to continue giving us their feedback on those plans.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to move down to the next question because I think we beat that other horse. So where are we now looking at other modes of options for the Campbellton corridor? Have we looked at off-wire at all?
I mean, we looked at off-wire. It's incredibly expensive, and in terms of advancing for alternatives recommendations, it's still a matter of light rail or bus rapid transit. Those are the two forerunners. Off-wire is incredibly expensive.
So you're saying that off-wire is more expensive than LRT?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the feedback was that off-wires, for when you cost benefit comparison, doesn't enter into the equation between the other two.
Okay. So do you mind sharing some of that information with me? I'd love to read about that as well.
I'll get back to you on that. Yeah.
Because I'm going to compare what you're speaking of with what was brought to my attention, because I don't want us to be stuck on a mode.
Right.
Especially since we are really trying to capture those federal dollars. And if I can get that $180 million from that mega grant and put it with that other $300 million that you've allocated for just the transit portion of Campbellton, I mean, that puts me at $480 million. And that sounds like another option. So I just want to make sure we're still exploring all of our options. And I saw in the news the other day that everyone is back on the Beltline rail now, which I'm happy for. I'm glad that we will be delivering LRT to Beltline. What are your thoughts on that? Did you read that?
I haven't read the most recent article.
It was just yesterday.
Thank you. So I haven't read it. My thoughts are consistent. I've said this before, that wherever the community and our elected officials and our mayor and our board end up, that's MARTA's happy to serve in that regard. So whatever the decision ends up being, we will move forward and deliver. We just want to make sure that we're solving a transit problem, creating a transit solution that fits, and we'll move forward.
Okay. And your thoughts are not centered around any financial details or?
I mean, my comments are not centered on financial details. My thoughts do wander from finance to feasibility to operational, sense. But my comments remain, wherever we end up, that's where we're going to deliver.
Okay. Okay, so I'll move on from that. Okay. But so I'm headed on a transportation exploration trip with Airtropolis, and we're looking at a different mode of transportation in Guadalajara. Are you coming?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, that's great. We will get to chat. Okay. So, but okay, I just, at the end of the day, I just want us all to be on the same page. Like, you'll be surprised how comforting it is when you know what you have and when you know what you're doing, regardless of what that is. Like, even if it's not your favorite thing, and it's not the worst thing in the world, you're on the right page, and that's important to me. So that's why I'm asking for us to really consider
All of the opportunities.
All of the opportunities, and being forthright about it, and making our list fit within what we're actually working on. So, and with that, I yield.
Thank you. We'll turn to Councilor Wan, and then we'll turn to Council President Shipman, and then we'll return. Yes, please. And then I'll come back to you 1 second, but we'll go Council Member Wan, Council President Shipman, we'll return to Councilor Lewis, and then, barring no other questions, we'll get on to the voting portion of the meeting.
It's just a thank you. I want to thank you all for giving us these numbers, because I get to dig into them later on this evening. So,
you're welcome.
All right.
In the interest of time, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm going to call my questions down to brief ones. On the More MARTA monthly progress report, the capital funds that have been expended on the streetcar, two categories, capital expansion and streetcar O&M. I just want to confirm the streetcar O&M, and that's essentially the cost of operating the streetcar on its route that's not been covered by any sort of fare revenue we've gotten, or this is just the cost period without taking into consideration fare revenue?
Yeah, that's just the cost. That's just the operating cost.
So where does the fare revenue go then?
That's a good question.
All right, if someone could let me know, that'd be great.
I'll look at that.
And then the capital expansion costs, I'm surprised to see almost $37 million. What have we been doing?
So if you go to page 8, it's broken down by the projects. Many of these projects we have obviously planning work underway. We've got several consultant teams working on each one of them. We have project management teams on each one of them.
I'm talking specifically about the streetcar.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the streetcar,
$36 million.
East or west?
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I'm just looking at page 5 where it says the
Okay.
capital expansion in streetcar O&M.
Yep. So capital.
Is capital expansion, is it the 30, that ties to the 36.5?
Correct. Yeah,
Got
the
it.
$36.5 million ties over to page 8.
Gotcha. Okay, I was like, I was wondering I thought it was all streetcar related, and I thought,
That's
what,
okay.
36
Well, it gets
million?
confusing because there's a lot of streetcars
Yep, gotcha.
listed in the.
Well, while I'm talking about the streetcar, on page 17, I want to make sure I understand the timeline chart for the extension. So is implementation construction?
Correct.
And then, so if I read this correctly, then we anticipate service would commence, the revenue generating side would commence in 2029, not 2027, as was originally represented, correct?
The current forecast right now is what's in here, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so 2029. And then my final question is on page. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's like lying about the final question, Dave. On page 8, are these the projects that have now been culled down in terms of what we are agree on it as more MARTA projects going forward?
No, so these are the ones we've actually expended money on.
Okay.
This is not the full list of more MARTA, right? The programmatic sequencing plan has kind of dictated what's gotten started, but the 17 or 18 projects that were listed on the more MARTA Atlanta program, this is just the ones that we've started working on.
So is there another schedule that we could look at that lists all of those? I mean, granted, you're saying some have not expended any funds on, but I think this goes back to Councilmember Overstreet's question about, these are the 17 projects. These are the original budgets. This is what we've expended on each one of them so far. This is, what the projected construction costs are going to be, what the other sources of funding may be. Because that, I think, will spark the conversation of whether or not we have any hard decisions to make. I guess that's what I was really looking for in the presentation today. So if that is a schedule that can be easily produced, that I think would be really helpful. The final question I have is, and this I promise is my last one. So in an instance where, for example, the Clifton Corridor project, the community, after community engagement and evaluation of alternatives, reaches a consensus that to move away from light rail and go to BRT. Should that happen and there are significant cost savings or it's a much lower cost, do those funds then, are they available for reallocation amongst the other potential projects? Is that how that would work, or no?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's the bucket of more MARTA revenue that we have that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was mentioning, some of these project costs change, right? Based on certain decisions, you may have, certain amount of right-of-way utility relocation that maybe wasn't anticipated. So as some of those things go up and down, we want to make sure, first of all, that we're carrying contingency on the projects, right? For the what-ifs. We're just in planning phase right now. Once those decisions are made, though, what mode, what the schedule is, that's when we can really lock the costs in more. So to make any moves before these projects get out of planning is also very difficult to do right now.
I gotcha. So yeah, I think that's where that schedule listing all the contemplated projects, what the budgets are, where we are, so that if there are opportunities for a change in approach that could result in some additional funds being available for reallocation, that I think is the good policy conversation that we could have. So, Mr. Chair, I yield. Thank you.
President Shipman.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to try to organize my questions so that they're easy to follow. If we start first with the operating capital budget, following up on Councilmember Lewis's questions, on page 5, if I tie the FY23 budget, revenue miles for bus and revenue hours for bus, back to some of the information that's in the MARTA, it looks like that roughly FY23 bus miles are going to be up about 8% over FY17. So this is sort of the beginning of MARTA. And FY hours for bus are going to be up about 10% over FY17. Does that feel about right?
Sorry, President Sherman, are you referring to the budget presentation or the MARTA?
So it's both. I'm trying to answer the question of how much bus expansion have we done. So if you look at FY23 on the budget, and you tie it to the FY17 operating hours by fiscal year by mode, which is page 6 of the MARTA, I'm doing some rough math, which says that revenue miles for bus are up about 8%, FY23 versus FY17, and revenue hours for bus are up about 10%.
So if we're talking about miles for bus, it's 28.4 for 23 compared to 28.1. So you're saying is that 8%?
No, it's 28.4. I'm going back to 17, not 19.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm tying those two numbers together.
Right.
I'm trying to answer the question of how much expansion has happened. So It's roughly 8 to 10%. Does that feel about right between those two? I mean, that's what the basic math shows.
I'll accept your math. I don't have the two together.
And then if I on page 5 of the MARTA, if I look at the operating cost for bus coming out of MARTA versus the overall operating cost, just operating, so it's rough math, it's about 10% as well. You've got $249 in operating in your budget, you've got about $21 million. I'm sure there's a little more in kind of other parts of the budget. It was about 10%. So I think that from Councilmember Lewis, I think it shows that there's about 10% expansion, and there's about 10% of the MARTA money spent on that expansion. So at least in that sense, I'm just trying to frame that question. Whether that's good or bad, I'll leave to others. But I'm just looking at the math, and does that feel about right? That bus hours and miles are up roughly 10%.
That they're balanced in particular, yes, that feels right.
Good. If I go to page 7 of the budget presentation, the ARP funds are listed at $140 million of a total operating of $652. That's the pie chart.
Okay. Yep.
So that means that ARP funding is about 21% of projected operating revenues this year.
Right.
Okay. 2 questions here. One, what kind of inflation rate have you baked into FY23? And then can you speak to what you're expecting on an operating basis inflation to look like in 24-25?
Sure. Well, why don't I ask our CFO, Raj Srinath, to come up and speak to the specifics of that.
Thank you, and good morning. It depends. For example, now, diesel and natural gas prices have gone up quite a bit compared to 22. We've seen about a 50% increase in both, so that's what we've assumed for fiscal year 23. And some of the parts and materials, depending on what they are, anywhere from 4 to 6% is what is being assumed.
Okay. So my question is, how are you going to fill the $140 million in FY24 and FY25? That's a big part of an operating budget. Is there an expectation that something's going to materially change to fill that gap, or is there another funding source that comes in?
There are a few options. One, we will be carrying slight surplus into 24 that we could use. That's one. I know that's not a long-term option. And the expectation is that the passenger revenues slowly will creep back to what they were before pandemic. It's 2019. What we are assuming right now, as far as passenger revenues goes in 2023, is about a 10% increase from fiscal year 22. So about $67 million in passenger revenues is what we are assuming. That's roughly about half of what it used to be in 2019. We do expect that to gradually grow back over the years. So it may take about 3 to 4 years for it to come back to normal. That's one. The second thing, the new IIJA infrastructure bill that was passed does provide for increased assistance for preventive maintenance and all that, which are our operating expenses, that's about 25 to 30% more than what we have been getting. So those two are significant increases. Hopefully the passenger revenues will rebound, but definitely the additional increase on the formula grants we are getting, that will continue over the next several years.
But just so I'm clear, you got $140 million in ARP funding.
Correct.
If passenger revenues were to double, let's do round math, it'd be $70 more million.
That's about right, yeah.
If you got a 30% increase in your maintenance and repair, if I turn to the next page, maintenance and repair is $17 million, and then you've probably got labor associated with maintenance and repair, because it's probably a hard number, right?
Actually, we get what I call 5307 and a couple of other formula grants. We get roughly about $90 million per year.
$90 million, okay.
So about 30-35% more than that will be anywhere from
$30 million.
30, yeah.
$30 million. So you got $100 million on the 140. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't have a structural deficit. And I'm asking this question not just to you. I'm asking it of the CFO at the city. I'm asking it to everybody, because when you have these one-time infusions of capital, sometimes your cost base grows, and then you end up, when they stop, with a structural deficit.
We have taken a 3-year look, and we do not see any structural imbalance or deficit in that.
Because you think revenues and other funding sources are going to catch up?
Catch up, and we may, I mean, again, it's, I don't have a crystal ball how long the continued increase in fuel prices continue, but the general consensus is that they'll definitely
come back down.
Historically, that's what has happened, yeah.
Okay, so it's important that fuel prices come back down in order to make sure that we don't have those. If those were to stay elevated, obviously, there'd be a problem.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any ARP fundings, if I look at page 11, are there any ARP fundings somehow categorized in the SGR funding sources?
No, those are called out separately.
And so all of these are sort of ongoing. There's nothing that's sort of one time in those. Is that correct? In the same way that ARP is, not literally one time.
There's one source of funding that's called a CRISA funding of $17 million. Mm-hmm. That's a one-time. We received a grant of $33.5 million. We expect to spend half of that in the coming year.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, I want to turn to some questions on the more MARTA package. I want to just level set myself again with some math. If I look at the current estimated project costs on each of the projects, excluding the Clifton Corridor, okay, I'm going to put Clifton Corridor off to the side. All the others that are in the back of this package, including the Summerhill Bus Rapid Transit, which is in design, it's roughly $924 million, if I just add up your numbers. And then if I look at, you've got $134 million carryover in capital, and roughly if the tax returns to its previous rate, let's say it's $75 million a year, which is a little generous. So you got $750 million over the next 10 years plus $134 million. That's $884 in sources of funding, capital sources of funding we can see. It's $924 million on the project list. Is that?
And you also have operation for any of the new services.
Correct. So
that will need to be in that bucket.
Right. So, but roughly, does that math sound about right?
I'll be honest with you. I did not add up each of the projects, and I'll just be clear. The projections here today, and of course you do want to look at the aggregate, but the projections that are here are based on, sort of a worst case scenario in terms of, contingencies and things that are baked in there. Yeah.
So that's my first question. What inflation rate or contingency rate have you baked into all the projects across these?
Each one is different based on the year of expenditure of the dollars, like something like Summerhill, and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I would assume somewhere between 3% and 5%. We have to, on the federal projects, we put them into the standard cost categories, and then we actually have to load them into our P6 schedules so that we can show when the funds would be expended, and we actually do a year of expenditure calculation by month.
But roughly we're using 3 to 5% ranges, not 6 to 8% or 9% ranges on inflation. Is that correct?
I can't attest to every single project here, but that's the rough magnitude that we have been using, yes.
Okay. And just to clarify again, Streetcar East Extension only goes to the Beltline. It's not on the Beltline, correct? Goes up to the Beltline. It's not actually on the Beltline.
Council President Manjeet Ranu, Chief of Capital Programs Expansion and Innovation. The Streetcar East project is planned to extend to Ponce City Market, so it does go onto the Beltline.
So the $175 million project cost includes the cost to extend the streetcar to Ponce City Market.
That is the current estimate.
Okay. So if we have $884 million in scene revenue, $924 million in current project design or project delivery costs, how do we anticipate filling the gap?
So part of the assumption for revenues to fund the capital program includes federal funds. And the discretionary funding sources that are competitive, that's why they're discretionary, there is an assumption that a significant portion of the capital expenditures for the expansion program would come from federal funds, like the Capital Investment Grant Program, potentially the Mega Grant, which is a new program. We're hopeful that through the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that there'll be even more opportunities for funding the program. Nevertheless, costs are considerably higher for the projects in the program than envisioned in 2016. And that situation here in the Atlanta region is no different than in any other major capital program. So, Councilmember Overstreet, you are correct in that we need to do a calibration of this program. And we are taking the steps to do that. We have recently hired a consulting firm, HDR, to help us prepare a financial capacity and planning scenarios analysis that will take several months to develop the model to do that. So that will give us a clear picture of our revenues and assumptions that we'll make about those that need to be reasonable, not overly aggressive, and also plugging in the currently estimated costs as we develop these projects further so we have a better understanding of what these projects cost as we go through the design and public engagement process. All of that will enable us to have a better picture of what options we have to choose from. There are trade-offs. And every capital program needs to go through this calibration every few years.
So if I turn to page 8, More MARTA Atlanta Program Capital Expenditures by Project Phase, all of these are in the planning stage except the Summerhill BRT. At what stage do projects have to be in order to qualify for federal funding?
So, for example, the Clayton South Lake BRT, it's our first project where we've entered a major federal discretionary funding program since the 1990s. So once the locally preferred alternative is known, that is typically when it's time to pursue the federal discretionary program. So that was what was done for the Clayton South Lake BRT. The Campbellton project, the Campbellton Community Investment Corridor, a Main Street for Southwest Atlanta, is next in line to be ready for that, provided a decision is made, which we are hoping for this summer.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Provided a decision is made in partnership with the City of Atlanta this summer, which we're hoping to do. So part of advancing programs complex like this is that we have to make decisions. And the planning process for capital programs like the More MARTA program is the most difficult part of the entire process, where we need to decide what we want to build. And so that decision about Campbellton is coming up this summer, so we can pursue the federal funds.
And is the design at 30% a requirement?
To get into making the application, no. So to enter project development, we just need to have that locally preferred alternative decided, and then we can begin the 30% design.
And preferred alternative for mode, is that correct? Or
mode and alignment station locations, yes.
Mode, alignment, and station locations.
Correct.
Okay. So if those decisions are made, it doesn't have to be at 30% in order to go for the federal funding. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want to go back to Streetcar East expansion for a moment. So as was reported by Maria Saporta, the mayor said the other day that he prefers and is excited about rail on the Beltline. The head of ABI, Clyde Higgs, said he was excited about rail on the Beltline. I've said I'm excited about rail on the Beltline. Many others have as well. The Streetcar East extension is in fact rail on the belt line, is it not?
That is correct.
So I'd like the CEO to come back up. I'm a little unclear why, if rail on the Beltline is in fact on the project Streetcar East extension, why isn't MARTA saying, yep, we're ready for rail on the Beltline? Because isn't that the project we're pursuing?
I mean, it's listed there now. That's the mode that's listed. But as I said, those conversations continue, and if that changes, MARTA's quite prepared to support whatever we land on. So, for me to say anything but we support whatever we land on would be disingenuous, because that's what we're here to serve. And if it's rail, it's rail, and if it's not, through further conversations, we're here as well. I don't think my role is to take a side in terms of what it ought to be. My role is to be pragmatic about what it is we have to do and get it done.
Okay. So in this list as it currently stands, there is rail on the Beltline Streetcar East extension, correct? That is the assumed mode.
Correct.
On Clifton Corridor Transit Initiative on 13, I'm assuming at $1.8 billion that is also rail of some kind.
Is
that correct?
Is it listed there?
13. To propose high transit line linking, and the total project cost is $1.8 billion.
Correct. So as I noted, we tried to carry, a contingent number in here so that depending on the decisions that are made in terms of mode, that we're not going to have to go back and refigure out all the financials.
Understood. But I'm just trying to make very clear for everybody on council, everybody in the public, of what is currently the assumption that drives the number.
Well, again, behind the number, but also the planning team doesn't necessarily have that, we're planning for this, right? The planning team is keeping the modes. But the cost right now, we have made it contingent based on, the most expensive thing so that we make sure we're properly budgeting.
And on page 11, the Campbellton Community Investment Corridor, what is the mode that drives the 308?
That is rail.
That is rail as well?
Yep.
Okay. So stated a different way, we're close to balance for what we can see revenues and sources, and I understand there's lots of assumptions, but we are close to balance what's here except for the Clifton Corridor over the next 10 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my question is, what has changed that will make the next 10 years different than the last 6?
In terms of?
More MARTA. 6 years ago, we...
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Nothing.
You gave us 2018 MARTA board presentation that has, lots of things that are going to be done. Gave us 2019. We've had 6 years. So what has changed, in your opinion, that will drive a difference in the next 10 years?
I wouldn't say anything's changed. I think right from the start, each of these are part of an iterative process, and the process, until the locally preferred alternative is established, it is an open conversation, as Mr. Ranu said, about mode alignment and stations. So it's the conversation that continues, and as we continue to look at our ability and the feasibility of providing each of these modes, that's the conversation that's on the table.
And just remind us, because we have lots of new council members, including me, who makes the decision? So the decision that specifically, let me be very precise, who makes the decision that triggers the ability to actually apply for federal funds?
Yeah, so ultimately, we make the recommendation to the MARTA board, and the MARTA board makes the decision.
Okay, and so what role is there per the IGA for the city or for ABI in that decision-making process?
I don't know if it's spelled out specifically. Do you have the specifics?
I don't know the specifics.
I know. Yeah, I know that. Go ahead, Carrie, speak to that.
Yeah, through the IGA, we've created 2 committees, the PMT, which is the Program Management Team, and the PGC, which is the Program Governance Committee. And there are voting members for each of those, and recommendations are made from the PMT to the PGC to the mayor's office for approval. Like I was mentioning, the 30% designs, the cost and schedule goes through that process. Any changes, major changes as defined by the IGA, go through that process as well.
So the decision on the mode and alignment is MARTA boards, and then the plans have to be approved in essence by the city per the decisions that are made by the MARTA board. Is that correct? So MARTA board's got the trigger to apply for federal funds, but the city still has oversight on what's actually delivered, said in a different way.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. One other question. I know that there were some funds that have been reallocated a couple times, most recently to study the Northwest Corridor. I think they are AR 490 funds. I may have the acronym a little bit off. Roughly $3.5 million. The city's put in some of its federal funding. What's the status of those funds?
Council President, you're referring to a grant application that the city and ABI pursued some years ago for the northwest segment of the
Correct.
Beltline?
Yes, I believe so. It was a study. It was a study grant that was. I think it was reallocated. Actually, it was going to study something else, and then it was reallocated to study the Northwest Corridor.
Because there aren't capital dollars programmed to construct that segment in the near term, it was premature to expend those grant dollars, and so the city and MARTA determined that we wouldn't use those dollars for that project.
So, did those dollars? Did they exist, and where are they if they existed?
I believe it's the city and not ABI that was the grantee.
I think
the
you're
city
correct.
needs to make that decision about how to work with FTA in the disposition of those grant dollars.
Gotcha. So it's on our side of the equation as to how to. And do you have any? Could those dollars be expended on studying other portions in which we are contemplating any of these projects?
Potentially, depending on the terms of the grant.
Okay. All right. So I would simply note, Mr. Chair, that's if it's the city, if there are unexpended funds on studying transit, that's something we should look into and make sure that we can, if appropriate, expend those funds. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We will turn to Councilmember Lewis to wrap up our Q&A with MARTA. We have a number of voting items, and I'm sensitive to losing quorum before we get to the non-presentation part of our agenda. So, Councilmember Lewis, the floor is yours.
And first, you said the unemployment rate is 15%.
Yeah, our shortfall of drivers is roughly about 15%.
So that's the lowest that I've heard since I've been here. When we talk about like employment shortfalls in the city of Atlanta, you're doing better than anybody in the city of Atlanta.
Happy to hear that.
I want to make sure I said that part. Also, next I want to talk about, because we keep hearing about the prices of it. I think Atlanta's the best city in the world. I'm blessed that we've been able to partner with MARTA with no competition the entire time. We've been able to partner with you. But when we talk about the cost of doing subways and streetcars and rail, there are too many cities that are able to do it, and they can't be better than us. And I can run through the name because we're talking about inflation, we're talking about the price, but there are people with shovels in the ground. I got about, I'll go through them one by one. But my question is, are you looking at other cities to see what are they doing and how are they able to have shovels in the ground doing rail?
Yeah, we consult with other transit agencies on a regular basis, so yes, we are.
So my question is Honolulu, New York City, Denver, Charlotte, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Columbus, Little Rock, Dallas, Jacksonville, Boston, Baltimore, Richmond, Philadelphia, Norfolk, Newark, Albany, Hartford, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Lansing, Waterloo, Iowa, Chicago, Milwaukee, Tulsa, Omaha, Nebraska, Dallas, and Monterey are all doing subway and streetcars. So why can't we do? What do we have to do to be like them? What do we got to do to mimic them?
I would say a couple things. One is, it's quite likely that all those cities that you've named are, if they are, and I accept what I don't know how old that is, but I accept what you found. If they're building rail, they're also building bus network redesigns. They're also building bus rapid transit. They're building several modes. It's quite likely that their decision to build rail was the result of years of this kind of conversation and alignment and modal discussion. So it's not an overnight thing. I'm quite familiar with transit agencies that are prolific in light rail and streetcars who are now building bus rapid transit. So for every one of those examples, I can speak to others that are looking at everything, as are we. The thing about shovels in the ground is the time will come when we are actually shovels in the ground. And I don't want to discount the importance of the planning stage, the old adage, measure twice, cut once, because if we think it's inconvenient now for delays while we're doing things on paper, the inconvenience of not doing the paper properly and having shovels in the ground and having roads disrupted and people's lives turned upside down, the delays in that phase are far more painful. So notwithstanding the fact that I said it's taking too long, I do put a lot of value in the planning phase.
And to confirm, thank you, Mr. Chair, to confirm when this article was published, January 26, 2022. So we're talking about right now because of all that infrastructure money we were talking about. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, CEO Greenwood. I will ask, we have had a few incidences over the last cycle of committee meetings where MARTA questions have come up, but there's not been a MARTA representative here at the committee. If it would be possible for MARTA to ensure, I know you have a whole team here today, but that's not necessary other than your quarterly report, but that there's a MARTA rep here for our committee meetings.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. We will turn to the voting portion of the agenda, and we'll start by adopting the agenda. Second to adopt by Juan, second by Dozier. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. The agenda has
Slow
been
your roll,
adopted.
Councilmember Juan. Yeah, we're going to move, but we have a motion to adopt the meeting minutes, and I got a second from Dozier. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. The minutes have been approved.
Perfect. We'll now turn to public comment. I believe we have 4 public comments. And we'll start with Betty Dura. You'll have 3 minutes. We'll go Betty Dura, Lawrence Miller, Brian Sumlin, and we'll close with Chris Lloyd.
Thank you for listening to a longtime resident and tax-paying citizen of Southwest Atlanta, 29 Kelso at Peyton, 30311, Betty Dura. I want to thank Councilwoman Andrew Boone for bringing our concerns before you. The city of Atlanta gave, and a lot of what I'm going to say doesn't necessarily relate to what you are doing, but it all interrelates. The city of Atlanta gave permission to Cates Construction Company in the late 80s to build on a tract of land. You agreed with all utilities to be placed underground. You even allowed the company to build some homes very close to pine trees with no consideration for what the challenges of 30 years of growth would bring. It is also hard for a new staff from the water department to locate individual meters. I have had to personally escort workers to the proper place to find them. I've even had difficulty in getting a permit to remove a tree whose roots are affecting my water line. Now, what you don't know is that if I cut off my water for any reason, the water is also cut off from my neighbor's house 4 houses down the street. I must synchronize my work with my neighbor. Now, the heavy trucks. Sanitation department.
Mr. If I don't, sorry to interrupt you, but if you could pull the microphone closer to you so that the TV is picking up your remarks, that'd be great.
And I'm speaking for item 27 on your agenda. The heavy trucks, sanitation department, delivery services, and others move through the street at a rapid pace. The drivers never give any consideration for the cracks, running water or the pavement or the grates where one hears the water running. That includes broken gates, grates. They simply drive right over, creating more problems. Now, when I drive down my street in several places, I have to slow down and choose whether to drive on the right or the left side in order not to drive on the weakened spots. Most drivers do not care. You have to live on my street to see the water that constantly flows. Now, I don't know whose water is always running, but that water bill has to be extremely high, and I mean running for years. I want to be able to tell my neighbors situated around the curve to move their cars so that one can avoid particular spots. I also want the police department to help enforce the law. Now, many years ago, I received a traffic ticket with a fine of $150 because I brushed up against a car, and it took the officer 1 hour to write a ticket. I'm assuming that he was trying to check whether the street was private or public. I still received the ticket, even though the street was considered, quote, private. We want the street to be considered public so that we can get all the amenities associated with a street: repair, paving, fire protection, street lights, hydrants, and so forth.
Mr. Rao, your time has expired, but I
And the
thank you.
fire hydrant is gray and not red.
Thank you. You touched on a number of issues, some of which are utilities, watershed, transportation. I think we're all happy to work with you. And Councilmember Boone is your council member, is that correct? And work with
Yes.
Councilmember Boone to try and get these issues resolved.
And thank you for listening, and you will hear another voice.
All right, thank you for coming down today. Lawrence Miller, J. Lawrence Miller.
Good morning. I'm J. Lawrence Miller. I'm the president of Adair Park Today in Southwest Atlanta. Councilmember Lewis is my council member. I'm also a board member of Beltline Rail Now. This city is growing. Our traffic is getting worse. Car insurance rates are going up because of the number of cars on the road. Two recent supporter report articles by none other than Maria Supporter herself encapsulate the sentiments of many, if not most, Atlantans. What she said was, Metro Atlanta is riding the wrong bus into the future. Highlighted is this observation. It's well documented that rail lines, streetcar, light rail, heavy rail, and commuter rail change the way land is used. Because of its permanency, rail transforms the development of communities into thriving nodes. So I have to ask, after so many years, why does it still seem that MARTA is reticent to build any rail in this city? What projects does MARTA plan to fund with the Biden infrastructure project dollars, and what segments of the Beltline are or can be available to apply for funding within the next 5 years? What is MARTA doing to ensure that we can apply for those dollars before those infrastructure dollars disappear? Why has MARTA removed Armour and Murphy Crossing as infill stations? When will MARTA release its feasibility study that was completed in February for the Northeast-Southeast Beltline Rail to the public, and why have they waited since they completed it in February? Why are they waiting? Last week, MARTA delivered 30% engineering for the streetcar extension to Pond City Market to the city and ABI. What we wonder is, will they be pursuing a design contractor to implement that project now? And isn't it possible to be in revenue service in less than 3 years rather than the 4 years that they project? Is MARTA prepared to apply for federal dollars for rail projects? If so, when? If not, then why not, after all of these years? Cost is the number one reason MARTA gives, but they appear to delay on all rail projects, and this has been going on for well over a decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sumlin, Brian Sumlin.
Hey, welcome back. Thank you. So, thank you. Good morning, City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. So, as a resident, first things first, let's set up a more flexible option in regards to community public comments because, you know, most of us work in the morning. For an example, I work at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the mornings, and it can be more easier sometimes to call than to rather to come in person. But lucky I'm here today. So, and then also congratulations to ourselves about the T-SPLOS program. We gave you the tools, so now let's follow the plan. Do one last fine-tooth comb of the list one more time before the program goes into motion, because on the 5-page list there are repetitive corridors, and we need to be trustworthy and prove that we are financially responsible. So, okay, that's good that after their presentations, the streetcar operations have gone down, which should help, you know, promote rail along the bell line. So that's the good thing. So I think we should use that as a what they call it. We call it like a kick in the butt. So it's like, hey, yeah, we should do that. We should do this for the light rail portion. The community makes the locally preferred alternative. I think that's where we're thinking where is the misconception and discrepancies in this program, because no, it's following what we're doing what we want to do, and no, it's the community that use these systems, you know, and I'm a testimony of that. I use it, you know, out of 7 days a week, 5 to 6 days a week. So, you know, just keep that in mind as we go forward. This is the people's money. So I just wanted to say that. And luckily, the mayor, congratulations with the decision to reaffirm the commitment along the belt line. See, because an example like this, that's a good example, right? That's a good example of how we can stay on task, stay on the course of the list, and be fair and be equal opportunity to all our neighborhoods. The infrastructure program promotes innovation and creativity, and we need to take advantage of it. Other cities already are doing it. It's already in motion. So I just don't want Atlanta to be left behind, because we deserve stuff like this. Thank you.
You, Chris Lloyd.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am and have been for 30 years a resident of the community called Kelso at Peyton, which is a part of the larger Chalet Peyton community. We consist of 32 homes that were built in 1989. I will reference some of the same points that Ms. Dura referenced. She's my neighbor. We are a community with major safety issues that affect our quality of life. Those issues have existed for far too long. I worked for many years with Councilman C.T. Martin trying to improve our communities in Southwest Atlanta, particularly within the Chalet Peyton community, and especially for the Kelso at Peyton community. We are a community of broken streets, major water leaks, and broken fire hydrants. At least one fire hydrant was shut down by the fire department several years ago because of a major leak. If a fire occurs, that would result in a total disaster. We appeal to the fire department for assistance. We appeal to Public Works to send in smaller collection vehicles to stop destruction of our street. We appeal to Watershed for assistance in identifying source of major water leaks that's contributing to the erosion of our only street. We pay taxes at the same levels as other city residents, but we only receive selective services. We continue to appeal to city agencies, including law enforcement, to help make our community a safer and better place to live. We would like to applaud Councilwoman Boone for creating legislation that would allow us to receive greater services. that we have paid for years and haven't gotten. We appreciate your support of Resolution 22R 3644. Thank you.
Thank you. As we turn to Section G, I do want to note, it's been mentioned a couple times, once by Councilmember Overstreet, but it's worth noting that today is the day after an election day, and I think we're all very grateful to the residents and voters in the city of Atlanta for passing a new T-SPLOS as well as a vertical and horizontal infrastructure bond package. It's now incumbent on the executive branch to execute as directed, and the legislative branch to make sure that that happens as well. And so we take that responsibility seriously and are excited about the opportunity to continue to improve our infrastructure. So to the voters, again, thank you. Item G on the consent agenda, items for first reading, I think we have one.
Item number 1, 22-01441, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to abandon portions of a public street known as First Drive between Cherry Street and State Street, consisting of approximately 6.539 acres, lying and being in land lots 80 and 81 on the 14th District, Fulton County, Georgia, and being more specifically described in the attached Exhibit A to the Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia on behalf of the Georgia Institute of Technology for the purpose at fair market value and said abandonment to be finalized upon completion of the construction and relocation of a replacement water main on the property by the Georgia Institute of Technology, authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute a quitclaim deed for such abandoned right-of-way and any other documents necessary to effectuate the abandonment and for other purposes.
Items for second read.
Mr. Chair, if there is no objection from the committee, we can take items 2, 5, 6, 7, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 together as a block.
No objection.
These are all traffic calming devices. Item number 2, 22-01395, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Morgan Place Southeast and Hooper Street Southeast and for other purposes. Item number 5, 22-01398, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Sanderson Street Northeast and for other purposes. Item number 6, 22-01399, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices along Daniel Avenue Southeast between Alston Drive and Memorial Drive and for other purposes. Item number 7, 22-01401, an ordinance by Councilmember Andrea L. Boone authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Kenner Drive Southwest and from Bakers Ferry Road Southwest to Fairburn Road Southwest and for other purposes. Item number 9, 22-01409, an ordinance by Councilmember Antonio Lewis authorizing the mayor's designee to install traffic calming devices on Evans Drive Southwest from Osborne Street Southwest to Murphy Avenue Southwest and for other purposes. Item number 12, 22-01414, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Habersham Road Northwest from Roswell Road Northwest to West Andrews Drive Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 13, 22-01415, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Blackman Road Northwest from Northside Drive Northwest to Roswell Road Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 14, 22-01416, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Norwood Drive Northwest from Tuxedo Road Northwest to Habersham Road Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 15, 22-01417, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Tuxedo Road Northwest from Woodhaven Road Northwest to Blackland Road Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 16, 22-01418, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Tuxedo Road Northwest from West Paces Ferry Road Northwest to Northside Drive Northwest and for other purposes.
Thank you. Commissioner Rowan, any reflections on these pieces of legislation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Josh Rowan, Commissioner, Land Department of Transportation. Just a reiteration that safety is our business, and our victory on these streets is incremental, so we fully support all of these measures.
Perfect. Motion to approve by Juan, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. These items are found favorable. Mr. Vice Chair, can we take items number 3, 4, 18, 19, and 20 together as a block? These are all for the installation of stop signs.
I'm sure the vice chair has an opinion, but the chair says yes. Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Please, just give you a hard time.
Item number 3, 22-0-1396, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersections of Boulder Crest Avenue Southeast, Flat Shoals Road Southeast, and Flat Shoals Avenue Southeast always stop control intersections, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersections and for other purposes. Item number 4, 22-0-1397, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Rocky Ford Road Southeast and Oakview Road Southeast an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 18, 22-0-1429, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Hill Street Southeast and Inglewood Avenue Southeast, Hill Street Southeast and Dalton Street Southeast, Hill Street Southeast and Nolan Street Southeast always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersections and for other purposes. Item number 19, 22-0-1430, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Miller Reed Avenue Southeast and Navarro Street Southeast an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersection and for other purposes. Item number 20, 22-0-1431, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston authorizing the mayor or his designee to make the intersection of Georgia Avenue Southeast and Reed Street Southeast an always stop control intersection, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install stop signs at the intersections and for other purposes.
Mr. Rowan.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We fully support these and recommend them for approval.
Motion by
Antonio
Lewis, second by Juan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Did you want to say something?
The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. These items found favorable. Mr. Chair, that takes us to item number 8 on our agenda. 22-0-1403, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Dozier authorizing the mayor or his designee to prohibit parking on Mildred Street Southwest from Parsons Street Southwest to Atlanta Student Movement Boulevard Southwest, to waive Section 150-92 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, to authorize the Atlanta Department of Transportation to install signage at the appropriate locations along the prohibited area and for other purposes.
Commissioner?
Yes, sir. We've reviewed this request and we have no objections.
Second.
Motion by Lewis, second by Dozier. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Takes us to item number 10. 22-0-1411, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood and Michael Julian Bond authorizing the mayor or his designee to remove the pedestrian respite at the intersection of Valley Road Northwest and West Paces Ferry Road Northwest and for other purposes. And the sponsor requested this item will be filed.
Great. Now I'll move to file. Can I get a second? Second by Juan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is filed by committee. This takes us to item number 11. 22-0-1413, an ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Woodhaven Road Northwest from West Paces Ferry Road Northwest to Tuxedo Road Northwest and for other purposes. The department recommends that this item be held.
Commissioner, is that fair?
Yes, sir. We do recommend that it be held for further evaluation. This is part of the Tuxedo Park plan. More to come on that.
Great. Motion by Lewis, second by Dozier. Please open the vote. Yeah, this is a motion to hold.
The vote is open. The vote
vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is held. This takes us to item number 17, 22-01419. An ordinance by Councilmember Mary Norwood authorizing the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Habersham Road Northwest from Roswell Road Northwest to West Andrews Drive Northwest and for other purposes. The motion is to file as a duplicate legislation from item number 12, 22-01414.
Great. So moved. Can I get a second?
Second.
Yeah. Please open the vote on the motion to file.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is filed by committee. This takes us to Section I, resolutions. Item number 21, 22R3650, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute an agreement for RFP-S-1210364 Vision Zero Action Plan with Tool Design Group LLC on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation for a term of 1 year with no renewal option and the amount not to exceed $520,000.00 for the development of the city's first Vision Zero Action Plan and associated scope, all contract work to be charged to and paid from funding numbers listed herein and for other purposes.
Commissioner Rowan.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. This is a really exciting one for us. The pandemic, in many ways, hit the pause button on some of our Vision Zero plans. One of which is this plan that ARC is paying for, and so we're happy to have Tool and Associates. They're an expert in the field of street safety, and so we're moving forward with this plan. We're also going to be moving forward with our task force. So more to come as we double down on Vision Zero.
Thank you. Councilmember Wan.
Commissioner, so what is the timetable on this, and what would the final deliverable look like?
Yeah, so I believe what we're looking at is about a 12-month delivery on this, and where we want to get into a couple things. One, from a communications standpoint, how do we deliver the message? You know, it's a challenging one because what we're talking about is really kind of a cultural change, you know, the slow down, save lives, but then also what are the near-term actionable things we can do within the streets. One of the things that we've looked at, and I give, I guess they're now referred to as Propel ATL, formerly the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. Rebecca and I have started visiting sites of severe crashes and fatalities, and there seems to be a trend developing of things that maybe wouldn't solve the problem immediately, but would make it better. And so what are those incremental improvements we can make? And so I would share that Tool was also the firm that did some of the design for the Peachtree Shared Street. And so what are things that aren't 10-year capital projects, but what can we do now? And then also how do we better message?
So is it more of a work plan or a communications plan?
It's really both.
Both? Okay.
Both.
Thank you. Move to approve.
Motion by Wan, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 22, 22R3651, a resolution by Transportation Committee on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation to ratify Amendment Number 1 to Agreement Number Georgia-2018-6 and amend Resolution 18-R-3443 adopted by the Atlanta City Council on May 7, 2018, and approved by the operation of law on May 16, 2018, to include additional funding sources 2501 Intergovernmental Grant Fund and 3351 T-SPOS Capital Project Fund as reflected in the Amendment Number 1. All other parts of the legislation to remain unchanged and for other purposes.
Commissioner Rowan.
Yes, sir. This is just continued housekeeping and adds a funding source to an existing contract.
I will move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 23, 22R3652, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the Aviation General Manager to approve use of up to $1.5 million of the car rental customer facility reserve fund for the purpose of reimbursing the rental car operators for construction of approved projects as part of the 2021 rental car center reallocation at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and for other purposes.
General Manager Bayadari.
BB Airport General Manager. I was going to give Josh to handle my paper since he went through so smoothly. Every 5 years, we're required to do a reallocation assessment of our rental car companies at the airport. We completed the reallocation assessment in December of 2021. And so now we're going to group families of rental car together for efficiency of space utilization. While we are reallocating those spaces, we want to take the opportunity to do some rehab of the facility, about $5 million worth, which the rental car will pay about $3.5 million for their exclusive space, and the other $1.5 million for common use will be absorbed by us, and it will be paid from charges that we collect from the rental car company, facility charges. This is needed, signage, striping, and so on and so forth.
I have a motion by, thank you, Mr. Badar. A motion by Lewis. Is there a second? Second by Juan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. This takes us to Section J, dual referred items. Item number 24, 22-01407. An ordinance by Councilmembers Dustin Hillis, Keisha Shawn Wade, Marcy Collier Overstreet, Michael Julian Bond, Mary Norwood, and Byron Amos, as amended by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee, an ordinance to amend Chapter 22, Article 3, Division 6, Section 22-182, and Chapter 98, Article 2, Division 1, Section 98-26, to provide approval for the police chief to exercise the authority provided in state law at Georgia Code Section 35-1-11 to designate, equip, train non-sworn law enforcement employees and firefighters and volunteers to assist in traffic control and to direct and regulate the flow of traffic within the city of Atlanta, including on the roadways at Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport and for other purposes.
Great. This paper came out of Public Safety with a number of additional council members signing on to it. Our public safety agencies, APD, Fire, have voiced their approval. We're here at Transportation. I'm wondering if the airport has any reflections as to how this may affect airport traffic control and if you are supportive.
Mr. Chair, we strongly endorse the passage of this paper. It will significantly improve our traffic management plan at the airport.
Terrific. I will move to approve. And the second by Juan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is found favorable. Item number 25, 22R3644, a resolution by Councilmembers Andrea L. Boone and Matt Westmoreland, as amended by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee, a resolution requesting the Commissioner of the Atlanta Department of Transportation, the Commissioner of the Department of Watershed Management, and the Fire Chief of the Atlanta Fire Rescue Department to provide emergency assistance to address replacing fire hydrants and street improvements for the senior residents living at the Kelso at Peyton Subdivision to improve the quality of life in the Peyton Forest community and for other purposes.
Commissioner Rowan.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. As we heard in public comment, this is a rather tricky situation. The infrastructure in this neighborhood is private, and I think we're at a position where are we making decisions with our brains or with our hearts? And I visited this area with Councilmember Boone, and it's very clear that the roads need repair, that the water infrastructure is lacking, and my fear is it doesn't appear that there's any fire protection in this area. The code would require that the residents themselves bring it up to a level at which we could take over if this were to become public infrastructure. I think that's a burden that they may not be able to bear. And so the thought was that each of the respective departments take a look at their items and what could we do to at least get things functioning to a point that we can make a decision whether it stays private or goes public. From a transportation perspective, there are about 6 areas that the road has totally failed. We wouldn't consider a rebuild, but there are some areas that we could dig up and replace. I do think now that the T-SPLOST and the bond have passed resoundingly, there will be some discretionary funds and might be an appropriate use for those. I can't speak for the council member, but there is some funding there. And so we do support this effort because it doesn't seem like it's the right move to continue to say, well, this is private property, this is your problem, as the problem continues to deteriorate.
Are there any, thank you for that, I presume we're all supportive, but obviously it opens up a Pandora's box. Are there other streets, or is there a slippery slope concern that you have with respect to other private streets in the city?
Yeah, I think the risk is always there for precedent setting, but I don't know that this is a bad precedent to set. We on occasion, what we see more often than not are the gravel roads. We've stopped calling them unpaved roads because they're really unbuilt roads. But I think we just have to address these on a case-by-case basis. You know, the fact that this is addressing more than 30 homes, this is a pretty significant endeavor.
I will move to approve. Second by Dozier. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is found favorable. Item number 26, 22R 3645, a resolution by council members Jason Dozier, Michael Julian Bond, Liliana Bakhtiari, Matt Westmoreland, Byron D. Amos, Dustin Hillis, and Jason Winston, as amended by the Community Development Human Services Committee. A resolution recognized the value of future Amtrak expansion within the city of Atlanta as part of the GHOST development and for other purposes.
Councilmember Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a resolution that I thought was prudent to try to bring before the public, recognizing a lot of the unique confluences of investments happening in our city at this time. We have a lot of private investment in our downtown communities, particularly Centennial Yards, which is the old Gulch site, Underground Atlanta, Forge ATL, the Newport projects that are happening in South Downtown. And so we have a lot of private investment projects that are going to be transformative for our city, but I thought it was important to ensure that we have an opportunity to ensure that there's federal investment so that there's a transformation of our region. And recognizing that Amtrak just last year announced its Connect Us plan to connect the city of Atlanta not only to sister cities like Savannah and Montgomery, but also to Chattanooga and Charlotte and Nashville, there has already been interest stated by this entity for expansion in Atlanta. However, we haven't seen much since that initial announcement occurred last year, recognizing the unique timing that's occurring right now with the development that's happening in the Gold site. I just thought that there was a unique opportunity to reclaim our city's history since the founding of our city occurred in roughly this location. Also recognizing that time is of the essence, and also recognizing just 2 weeks ago, the federal government through the Federal Transportation, the Department of Transportation just announced its guidelines for the expansion of intercity rail across the country. I thought the timing of this couldn't be better to really announce to our federal government and to Amtrak and to the powers that be that Atlanta wants expansion of passenger rail in our city. What better place to do it in the Gulf? So I recognize that there may be other sites available. I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that Atlanta is not left behind in our ability to connect our city to sister cities, especially in response to climate change, in response to transit and transportation equity. And so with that being said, in my haste to draft this resolution and get this before the public, initially I hadn't sought co-sponsors, but we've slowly are changing that. And so I'm thankful for CDHS where this was dual referred, where this was voted on unanimously. My colleagues in that committee signed on to this paper. And so I want to give our colleagues here in the Department of Transportation or the Transportation Committee to do so as well. So I'd like to motion to amend to allow colleagues. I see Councilmember Overstreet would like to be added, Councilmember Lewis, Councilmember Juan, and Councilmember Faroki would like to be added as co-sponsors of this legislation.
The vote is open.
Vote to amend is open.
The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item has been amended.
And if you have any questions or comments, and then I can make a motion.
I'll let you make your motion. I'll make a quick comment, and then we can vote. Going to move to approve?
I was going to move to approve as amended.
Okay, wonderful. I will second that. I'll note as we open the vote that 25 years ago, when I was 19, I was an intern in this building, and the council member I worked for at the time had a a large 3D model of an MMPT that was supposed to go with the Gulch. And so this is an idea that's a long time coming, and I told Councilmember Dozier I appreciate his push on this. You know, it's something that the region is sorely lacking, and our state's sorely lacking. I also appreciate him acknowledging that there are other sites in the city, including Arbor Yards, that would work well with Amtrak alongside the Gulch. And so I think the general thrust here, and my take is, you know, there's a almost unanimous consent amongst council members that we want to see passenger rail and a more robust Amtrak terminal in our center city. So please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended. Thank you all so much. Mr. Chair, we have 3 items coming off held.
Please proceed.
Item number 32, 22R 3434, an amended resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute agreement for contract RFP-S-1220072 landscape maintenance and debris control at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with Ed Castro Landscape Incorporated on behalf of the Department of Aviation for 3 years in an amount not to exceed $2,988,000.00. All services will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes.
Thank you. General Manager Bayadari. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council Member. I strongly recommend approval of this paper. We have had a lot of discussion on the paper, a lot of discussion centered around the process that was used to evaluate the solicitation. I want to preface by saying that we heard this body loud and clear on the process that was used to evaluate this paper, same process as we use for all of our other papers. However, since there was a robust discussion, the CPO, under the CPO leadership, Martin Clark, and OCC leadership, Bruce Bell, and user agencies, we have embarked on a forensic analysis to look at the process that is in place right now. In the meantime, we will continue to use the same process for all other solicitations coming forward. But I want to assure this body that aviation, along with others, to include the law department, is doing a forensic analysis. We had our first evaluation working group meeting last Friday at the airport, 4 hours long. Robust, very collaborative discussion from the entire team that was there. I think it was about 20 of us. Second working group meeting is scheduled for next week, June 1st, and we will have 5 more working group meetings to look at the entire process and make recommendations where necessary to strengthen the existing process.
Thank you. I will move to approve. Is there a second or any comment? Second by Juan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 33, 22R 3583, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into contracts RFP-S121082 general engineering services as listed herein to provide general engineering services to the Atlanta Department of Transportation on a task order basis for an initial term of 3 years with 2-year, 1-year renewal options, and to add funding to a joint task order fund in the amount not to exceed $25,000,000.00 with all funds to be charged to and paid from the project and account number listed herein and for other purposes. And Mr. Chair, this item needs to be amended. The amendment attaches the IPRO report to the legislation.
Motion to amend by Juan, second by Faroki. Please open the vote to amend to add the IPRO report.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item has been amended.
Commissioner Rowan, any reflections?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Just real quickly, just excellent timing on this one. Thank you to the voters in Atlanta. The 2022 infrastructure referendum was a resounding success, and you go into day one with a new on-call engineering contract with 14 reputable teams to serve the city. So this is excellent. We strongly recommend this for approval.
I will move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dozier. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended. Our last item is item number 34, 22R3587, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute an agreement for RFP-S-1220033 with A Action Janitorial Services, LLC at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport on behalf of the Department of Aviation for a 3-year term with 2 one-year renewals in the amount not to exceed $1,469,880.36. All contracted services will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein. And for other purposes, and Mr. Chair, this item will need to be amended to attach the IPO report.
Motion to amend by Juan, second by Dozier. Please open the vote to amend to attach the IPRO report.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item has been amended.
Mr. Bayadari.
Mr. Chair, I think you missed it when we talk about collaboration and teamwork. My good friend, the commissioner, came back over here and set the microphone to reach my level here. So I know I'm a vertical challenge, but thank you, Josh. I appreciate that, my friend.
We're going to start calling this the Transportation Committee and Comedy Hour with B. Bayadari.
This paper was held because of the IPO. The IPO report was submitted for review by this body here. We're recommending award of this contract to provide janitorial services for our outbuildings. We have 14 buildings outside of the airport pier, along with our guard booths, etc., to provide janitorial services.
I will motion to approve as amended by Juan.
Second.
Second by Overstreet. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended. And Mr. Chair, that concludes our legislative items for today.
Wonderful. To my colleagues, thank you for your engagement and questions of Marta and full participation today. Any closing remarks before we adjourn? Ms. Overstreet.
Don't worry about it.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you to Quez for coming today. Thank you, Marta, for coming today. And we're going to go and get somebody their job back as soon as we leave here. So I'm ready to go so I can go to HR to help fight for somebody to get his job back. Thank you.
All right. You good? Yep. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.